Ready. Welcome. We're live here on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and everywhere else in the world, I hope. I'm Diane Ray, co-founder of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network, and this is another edition of Meet the Podcasters. And this is an opportunity for me to introduce you to one of our amazing podcasters that you may not be aware of. And if you are, yay, tell all your friends. I have a great podcaster guest to introduce to you today, Victoria Shaw, and she is the host of the Intuitive Connection podcast. And we're so happy to have her on board. So welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. I'm so excited for our conversation. I always love talking to my friends.
Well, I'm so glad that you can join me and jump on here and chat. So for people that are not familiar with your show, maybe they came over to the site and they're looking at all the different podcasts. What are some of the things that you talk about on Intuitive Connection?
Well, most importantly, we talk about our namesake topic, which is your intuition. And your intuition is your spiritual GPS that can inform and guide you to have your best, most purposeful, most joyful, most meaningful life. And I think it is one of your greatest soul's gifts and human gift too, because we're all spiritual beings having this human experience. And for me, learning to connect with my intuition changed everything in my life in the best possible way. And ever since then, it's been my mission and purpose to help other people tap into it too. So that was the main impetus behind the show when I started it 4 years ago. And since then, it's expanded for sure, as my journey has expanded. And we talk about all things spiritual, I think, but often from that intuitive lens, and often too from, my background is as an academic psychologist. So that's kind of where I started. So I also love to explore the kind of interface between spiritual topics and psychology. So we do a lot of that too. And intuition fits in just fine in that niche.
I love digging into intuition and exploring my own. And I think it's so interesting that as human beings, we all have it, right? We all have intuition. We may call it that little voice, the tap on the shoulder, but it's really the level of how you can develop it, right? And the gifts that you can receive from really developing your intuition are huge. I mean, it's not just not knowing or knowing when to not walk in the dark alley, or something like that,
Yeah.
but really in a much bigger way. But maybe that's a way people can understand it, is that little feeling that's hard to describe.
Yeah. I think a lot of times people do think about intuition as like what I shouldn't do, right? Oh, I knew I shouldn't, and I did, and then oops. And I love those examples because they do show us that our intuition is working, and they do show us that we are tuned in. And sometimes we remember even more the times we didn't listen than the times that we did, that just seemed seamless and we didn't even know we were following our intuition, just good things happened. But it's more than that. It's more than, and the other thing I get is a lot of people that want psychic development, which is something else that I teach because, I'm a medium and all of that good stuff as well. And that comes access very easily to me. But we all have these gifts. But I like to think of intuition as a way of life. It's a way of life. It's about living in alignment with your higher self, with your soul, with your inner gift, with your joy, with your abundant nature. I mean, who doesn't want to do that, right? Who doesn't want to feel more purposeful and happier and more abundant and have things flow more in their lives and just have life feel easier and more peaceful and more fun? We all want that. Sometimes we think that we have to work really hard and go in the other direction to get it, but that's what we all want. And that's what following your intuition provides for you again and again and again. And so I think of, that intuitive connection as living intuitively and learning to listen more to those nudges and tune in more to that wiser part of ourselves and a little bit less to the egoic mind, which we all have, But most of that is just kind of fear-based things that we've learned that we have to do or have to avoid or have to do before we can get to the happy, fun, abundant part. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a slower, less pleasant way to go.
And in
So
these challenging times too, I mean, we really need to look within and tap into our intuition more and more.
yeah.
And what are some of the things that you do? I mean, I know you live not far from me here in beautiful San Diego, and you love to take walks and get out into the ocean and meditation techniques and things like that. What are some things you do that you teach people
Yeah.
that can help them enhance their intuition?
Yeah. Well, I teach 3 simple steps. Um, the first one is to pay attention to how it's already working for you because we all have it. And as soon as you set that intention, ooh, I want to expand my intuition. Ooh, I want to use this more. Ooh, I'm already using it, but I want to make it even sharper, even better. I want to surrender to it even more. You've already sent out that ping to the universe, and the universe is already responding. And then you want to tune in to where it's already happening because it is. And I often invite people in the beginning of their journey to journal on all the things in your life that, you thought were your intuition, especially the ones that flowed really well. And you'll start to see like millions of examples, right? That you didn't even realize until you just start to go, oh, it's there, it's there, it's there. And so the first thing is just notice where it's already happening. And then, bonus points if you can start to tune into how uniquely does your intuition speak to you. Because it's different for everyone. And sometimes we get the idea, oh, I went to this gallery reading with this lady, Victoria, and, I want to do what she does. And if you do, that's cool. I can teach you to do what I do, but I want to teach you to do it the way you do it. Because we all, our intuition is as unique as we are, and we're all inescapably unique. And that's a beautiful offering that we make to this world. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And your intuition is as unique as you are. And so it's going to be different for everyone. And when we learn our intuitive signature and we start to reflect on, how do I know? Is it a feeling in my body? Is it a wise voice in my head? We start to tune into it even more rather than trying to do what we think someone else is doing. So that's step number 1.
I love that you're sharing that because I think sometimes people, when they meet authors or teachers, like you and others, that they tend to think, well, these people are just magical and they don't have the problems that I do. They
Yeah,
have these wonderful powers. But what you're saying is that we all have these abilities and that we can enhance them. And that's what you teach people to do.
for sure. And just the first step is noticing how it's happening for you. And also, I was chatting with another medium on my podcast the other day. Actually, this happened twice. One episode just hasn't been released yet. And they were both sharing about how they receive information. Like one, he's a really, a Jared the Medium. It was a couple episodes ago. And he was talking about how when he says he sees something, like I see a man in a hat, he's like, I don't really see it. I feel it. I can feel that there's a man in the hat, wearing a hat. And I describe that to you. And that makes our human minds go, what? Right? But that's oftentimes how intuition works. It's very multisensory. It doesn't always fit into the neat little boxes of our 5 senses, right? And it's even more important because he's explaining this is how I experience my intuition. But when I talk about it, you might think something else is going on in my head. And so a lot of times we discount the thing that is our intuition because we think it's not that thing that we think it should be. Does that make sense?
I think
So,
so. Yeah, I understand. Like the person you're describing would maybe be more clairsentient, would
mhm,
be maybe the
right.
description. He would feel it more,
Yeah.
where maybe you experience things a little differently. Like how do you receive information like that?
So I am also very kinesthetic. So I can feel the energy in things. Like for example, I can tell oftentimes when I'm in my intuition or someone else is in their intuition by how it feels. Like the energy feels different. So that's always been a really big one for me. I know things. So I can't describe it, but I just know it. And so the example I always give is when I was pregnant with my first child, I knew she was a girl. I didn't think she was a girl. And I knew it so hard that when whoever the person gives you your ultrasound, I'm blanking on the word, but when he was like, he's like, I asked him, what sex is she? And he just looked at me like, what? What did you? And I didn't even know what I said, but I just knew it was a girl, like in my being. And, so it's that knowing that we can't explain how we know, but we know. And, sometimes it's so strong that like, it's almost like if this isn't true, I'm losing it. And then I also hear my guidance quite a bit. So sometimes it does sound almost like words in my head. And other times the way I can describe it is I kind of go to the place beyond words. I was a channeler long before I knew I was. Back in my days at Princeton and at university and high school, I realized I was channeling. I just didn't know what it was, but I would go to the place beyond words and then kind of feel the information. And then I would come back and like find the words for it. So those are some of the ways that I experience my intuition. I get some visions now too, like visual information, but that was the last one for me. But it's really unique for everyone. And, we have these 5 clairs that a lot of psychic development people teach about, which you were alluding to, and clairsentient is one of them. But I think it's much richer than that. I think those categories just loosely can kind of, encapsulate the richness of our intuitive experiences when we really tap into them.
Right. There's another one, and I don't know if it's one of the clairs, like there's clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, where you hear. And
Yeah.
I'll smell things. Is there
Yes.
a clairsmellience?
Oh, yes. It's Claire. Oh God, there's Claire Gusta something. Taste too. I think a lot of chefs have that one, right? Where they can taste things that haven't happened yet, right? And that's probably how they create the new wonderful things that they do. And I get that one. But yes, smell is very powerful for people. And sometimes too, you smell your grandmother's perfume and
Yes.
she's new, right? So for sure.
I've smelled my grandmother's perfume because she used to wear,
There
it
we
was
go.
called Estee Lauder Youth Dew. And I don't know if you've ever smelled it. It's like a very, distinctive smell. And there was another one, Calichet. Like these are old perfumes, Chanel number 5. So I've noticed those things. And I think sometimes we'll tend to just blow it off like, oh, it came through the air conditioning vent or something like that, or someone passed by. But I mean, something that distinctive, I knew for sure that gave me the feeling that, that maybe she was around.
Yeah.
So we do have to not discount that, right? And just take it seriously.
And your intuition also, sometimes it doesn't have to be supernatural. In your case, it most definitely was. But, sometimes your intuition will direct you to a smell, right? Like that reminds you of the person because the person is around you. So a lot of times too, my intuition just go look here, honey, where you focus your attention. All of a sudden I'm thinking of something, or all of a sudden I'm looking at something. That's your intuition too.
Right? See, it's so cool you're talking about this on the podcast. I love that people can listen and find out all this information. Yeah. And you mentioned the other medium that you would talk to, and you have all different guests, not just other mediums or psychics, but authors. I mean, was there a special guest that you had that people can maybe go back and listen to that show that you thought was so cool? That was, because I have some of my favorite shows that I like. Yeah, you must have a couple of favorites.
Guests, and we do 3 things on the show. I do solo episodes, which are more teaching moments, and a lot of times too I chat with my spirit guides, and we kind of riff off topics together. And I've done a couple. One of my favorite ones on that one was not a guest. I did a couple last year. I did one with my deceased grandfather. I did one with my father who passed over last year. So those were really fun. I did one this summer. That was way out of my comfort zone, but it turned out to be one of my favorite episodes. I did an episode where I chatted with our founding fathers, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and Ben Franklin came on board to talk about how hopeful they are for the future of our country. And wow. That was really powerful.
That's cool to hear. I have to listen to that show.
Me too. Yeah, I was so
I didn't know you did that.
It was totally intuitively guided. I had a break in the calendar, and I just was like, I'm going to record an episode called Finding Your Freedom. And then I actually had to record it. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to plug something else in there. And I heard, nope, you're going to have a conversation with the founding fathers. And I said, well, I'm going to sit. They're not live, thank God. So I sat down, but it was really beautiful. I learned a lot from it too.
Wow. I'm going to go back and listen to that. And do you remember the title of the show?
I think it's Finding Your Freedom, and it was July
Wow.
2nd of the release date was July 2nd of 2024.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, did you tell or did you ask Alexander Hamilton if he knows about the play? And
Oh yeah, I'll tell you a funny story.
that's great.
I was listening to it afterwards to decide if I wanted to use it, and I'd send it to a friend too to ask her, like, is this usable? Because it was a little out of my comfort zone to do this. And I'm listening to it. I'm walking around my neighborhood, and I'm listening to it. And first I think it was Hamilton, and then Washington. And I'm thinking to myself, this is great information, and I love this, but it also feels like I could have gotten this from watching the musical. So I was like a little bit skeptical. And then we came into Ben Franklin, who I know very little about. And as I was listening, I'm like, wow, this I don't think I could have made up. Like, this feels like this is kind of expanding my awareness and my knowing of things. He's telling me things that I didn't already know. And Diane, this is a true story. At that moment, I looked up, and across from me was a van that was called Liberty Mechanical with a big Liberty Bell on it. And I just was like, okay. And it was also parked. A famous spiritual teacher used to live on my street, Esther Hicks. And so when everything happens outside of her house, I don't know, I'm a little magical thinking. I'm always like, ooh, it's a double sign. And it was parked outside of her house. So I took that as you guys will have to listen to the episode yourself and see like what you think, because, it has to land with you. But that made me feel a little bit reassured that I was talking to Ben, and so we released the episode.
Wow, what a cool sign. I'm definitely going to go back and listen
Okay.
to that one.
It was really fun. And then I think my favorite guest that I ever had on the show, and this was a couple years ago, but he was just someone whose work really impacted me. So having that conversation was just special to me. Was the episode with Rob Schwartz, who is the author of Your Soul's Plan, Your Soul's Gift, Your Soul's Love. He just made such an impact on me years ago in my own journey reading those books. And so interviewing him on the show was just fantastic. And he's just a great guest. It was a really beautiful conversation. So that one, oh God, but I think that was back in 2022. So it's you got to search for it.
Yeah, well, you've got a couple of years of stuff for people to go through and all the archives. And that's what's so great is everything's there, so people can go back and listen and find their favorites. So I'm just curious. I mean, you're such a smarty as an academic. I mean, you've had this amazing training. And when you interact with other people that are like quote academics, PhDs or other psychologists, and they know that you work in this realm, I mean, do you have to, you know, change gears, or do you kind of keep it under wraps?
I'm so over that. I mean, so do I walk up and say, hey, I talked to Ben Franklin this morning.
Right.
I choose my audience. You know what I mean? Like I'm not in the business of trying to convince anyone of anything that doesn't feel right and true to them. And I don't think that we need to be, right? I'm here to share what I have to share. And, oftentimes if you're drawn to me, it's going to be relevant and helpful for you. So, I'm not trying to change anyone's mind. And I usually tend to attract people in my space that are open to what I do because that's fun to me. And so that's usually how it flows. But when I lived in Connecticut, before moving to San Diego, I used to do two things. I used to be a licensed professional counselor, and I used to do this intuitive work. And I started doing those things in parallel after stopping being a research psychologist. And for a while, I kept them separate, and then they kind of blended because most people thought it was really cool to have a counselor that was also, intuitive, psychic, medium, and all of that good stuff. But I would still, when I would have a new client, I would always kind of figure out which story I was going to lead with. And I made the decision when I moved into California not to do that anymore because I just wanted to be me. So I'm pretty straightforward about what it is that I do and all the tools in my toolbox and how I work. And I'm pretty straightforward with my very spiritual peeps. Yes, I went to Princeton. Yes, I did my postdoc at Columbia. Yes, I'm still cool. So, I play it both ways, but we were talking a little bit before we went on camera that I had some lovely guests on my show in August of this year. They're researchers at Yale, and they study people that are having psychotic experiences, and they're very interested in how people that are having psychic experiences, right? So people that hear voices that are helpful for them, that they think enrich their lives, how those people's experiences can help people that hear voices that don't feel helpful to them. And I thought that was just such beautiful work. And I had participated in a study they did back in 2017 when I lived in Connecticut. So I had them on the show, and they invited me to speak at their lab. And, so here I am in a lab at Yale speaking to a bunch of Yale medical students and Yale medical practitioners. And you know what they wanted to know about? They wanted to know about how to enhance their intuition.
That is so fascinating. I love that those worlds are merging and colliding a little bit more, and
For sure.
that people are taking that kind of research seriously and looking into, and into everything. I
Yeah.
love that. That's so fascinating.
So more and
How
more, I
cool.
preach to the choir. There were a few people in the room, I think, that were skeptical, and maybe a few that were bored, but there were a lot that really wanted to know, and they wanted to use it more in their work and their science, in their clinical work. And it's beautiful. It was a real honor to be invited to do that.
That's amazing. I mean, you've given me some inspiration today, because lately I've been feeling that where is my guide? Where is my intuition? Because is it letting me down? Am I not hearing it? And maybe
Oh,
I'm just trying too hard and I just need to relax and,
yeah.
kind of let things come.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you're out there and you're sharing this information. So are there any cool guests coming up that you can tease us a little bit and people can subscribe to the show and make sure they don't miss it?
Oh gosh, I don't know about any cool who's coming up. I never know.
Any cool guests?
I've got the Carefree Medium who's going to be coming up next year, Suzanne, but I can't remember her last name. But she is such a beautiful energy, such a beautiful soul, so authentic. Our paths crossed in a couple of ways, and she's going to be coming on. I don't know, but lots of good things. And the other thing we do on the show that we didn't talk about that's really fun that I think people would want to experience is I do readings on the show. And so I have a lot of guests that come on, and this one's anonymous, but they come on, to get kind of what I do in my private work. And they come to get guidance from their spirit guides and from their higher selves, which is kind of what I do, and sometimes from their deceased loved ones. And those are some of my favorite episodes too, because we learn so much from each other's stories. We learn so much from each other's stories. And, a lot of times we don't hear it when it's about us, but when, the one I just did, Pam, and, is having this issue with her sister. So many people have emailed me after that episode. Oh my God, I needed to hear that, especially before Thanksgiving. Oh my God, that was
Right.
so helpful for me. And so, we get a lot from hearing each other's stories. So that's the other thing that we do. But there's going to be lots of fun in the new year. And I'm going to be focusing actually a lot in the first couple episodes on intuition development and concrete tools and strategies to do that, because I'm teaching a class on it in mid-January. So I'm getting geared up to do that. So that'll be the theme right out of the gate in early January.
Well, I know you've got some amazing things coming up, and I urge people, if you catch this video later or on Instagram, YouTube, wherever you're watching, definitely check out Victoria. Get the podcast, subscribe, Intuitive Connection. You've got so much information to share. I love people's stories too.
Yeah.
So I think it's such a great way to learn, because we're all more alike and more connected than we want to admit. And those stories really help connect people. So I want to send people to your site too, victoriashawintuitive.com. And remember the show, Intuitive Connection, part of the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network. So I'm so happy that you could spend some time chatting. Victoria is the real deal. I just want to tell people we had a dinner not too long ago with another person, and you shared some information with me that was pretty amazing.
That was really fun. You're
It
always
was.
to hang out with.
We have to do that again. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. And thanks everybody for joining us for this Facebook Live. Mindbodyspirit.fm. Check out all the podcasters there. And goodbye, everybody.